Danny Flexen for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by Andy Clarke, who most people watching this will know from Sky Sports Boxing, I would imagine, although it's just one string to your bow. I guess the first thing people out there will want to know is, and I get this question a lot, so you probably get it even more, is how you first broke into, I guess, journalism generally, but boxing more specifically.
So I started 20 years ago at TalkSport. So I finished university in 1999, and that summer I just kind of came down to London with a couple of friends. No real clear plan what I was going to do. Not having a clear plan then was fine. It's a different situation now, and there weren't really media degrees, to be honest. There were a couple. Cardiff and City, they were the ones you could do that people would take seriously. Right. Other than that, without wishing to sound too disparaging, they didn't really mean much. So the fact that I hadn't done one didn't matter. And I had to kind of think about what I wanted to do. I actually took the civil service fast stream exams to get my mum off my case. And I passed those, but the name fast stream is slightly misleading because the whole thing takes a really, really long time. And I wasn't that keen on it anyway. And I just love sport. I'd always loved sport, and I felt like I had the confidence to be on air, possibly, although that was miles in the future. And I just wrote a lot of letters off to radio stations, so Capital, BBC London, TalkSport had just relaunched from TalkSport Radio, loads of locals around London as well, IRN, places like that. And that was a very doable route in then, because there were lots of radio stations taking sport who carried a sport programme. And that's how pretty much everybody I know got in. And TalkSport was the one who made me kind of like the best offer, in that they wanted me in every day. They didn't offer me any money because nobody does to start with. And I was in as a runner and just took it from there. It's one of these interesting industries, and I don't think it's changed that much, in that the route in is just kind of A to B. You've just got to make calls, send emails, knock on doors, and keep going and hope that one opens. And I think it is different now, because not nearly as many radio stations are taking sport or carry as much sport, and getting straight in at TV wasn't something I really thought about. So I think it's probably harder actually these days.
I think there's a lot more people these days, young boxing fans or whatever, who want to be specifically boxing journalists or boxing commentators. And I always think it's more like medicine. You know, you do your basic training for 8-10 years, however long it is, and then you specialise. I think you have to get that foot in the door first. But a lot of people now seem to only want to cover boxing, and it's not really an option. It's not a big enough sport at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And when younger people hit me up for advice on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, that's what I always say, is that I never thought about what I would specialise in. I just love sport, and my biggest sports were, in no particular order, football, cricket, and boxing. I knew more about football and cricket because I played them and they were more mainstream. Boxing, I was always kind of fascinated by, but I'd never done it because it wasn't in school. So it was more kind of lodged in the back of my head at that point. And yeah, you have to learn how to do the job first. And I things moved fast at TalkSport because it was that kind of place. Not because I was particularly brilliant. It was just if you put your hand up for stuff and you had a bit of initiative, you could get to do things quickly there. But I'd do whatever they wanted me to do. I did all sorts of things because you just need to master the discipline of it, master it, be able to do it, and then you can apply it to anything. And so I didn't really start to home in on specialising on boxing until I was 10 years in, because, like you say, there just isn't that much work. And I still do other bits and pieces now, not nearly as much as I used to. But yeah, I think that is one massive difference, is that because of the digital platform, basically, you can set yourself up and put yourself out there as what you are and what you want to do. You can put yourself on air, basically. And I've got a lot of admiration for people who do that, because it takes some, it takes some guts. But yeah, that is the main difference, is that nobody who went the route I went none of us had the faintest thought of, well, I'm going to say to them, I only want to cover this, because they'd have just laughed at you. They'd have just laughed at you. Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with what you said.
So when did you first start to kind of, I don't want to say specialise, because as you said, you still do other sports as well, but when did you first start to hone in on boxing as a thing, and obviously leading to eventually working on Sky Sports as well?
So it would have been 2000, about 2010, because I started doing, when I was at Talksport, they did do some boxing at the very start. They were quite heavily into it around 2000. I remember going to Lennox Lewis, Franz Boter. I wasn't working on it. I kind of worked on it in the morning. Colonel Bob Sheridan was doing a breakfast show from Dockland somewhere, and I was kind of a runner for that, which was amazing. And I got a ticket, so I went to that, but that petered out quite quickly. So after that, they weren't really covering fights, but I'd try and, as soon as I was trusted to go to press conferences, I would say, oh, Amir Khan's got a press conference or whatever, or Ricky, or they're only interested in the big names, and I'd get myself along. But other than that, there wasn't really a lot going on. So I kind of started to move from radio to TV in about 2008, and 2010, I started commentating on football for Sky and for the Premier League. And once I'd done one season of that, that was when I got in touch with the boxing department at Sky, because an old Talksport pal of mine, a guy called Dave Finch, was working in the department. And that's key, isn't it? You know, you got a man on the inside who can vouch for you. And he had a word with Adam Smith, and they got me in for a test commentary, because the bonus about leaving it that long was that by the time I did, they didn't really have any concerns about whether I could commentate or not, because I was already doing it for Sky for football. It's completely different from boxing, but they weren't going to have to teach me that much about how you do it. Hopefully they would agree with that. And yeah, I just got an opportunity from there and did some undercards, and it was quite in and out for a while, because first thing I did would have been late 2011. Crawler Matthews in April 2012 was my first main event. And then that summer they signed the exclusive deal with Matchroom, and the schedule cut in half. So I wasn't needed then, which was a blow. But then I just went away and worked for everybody I possibly could. I've worked for basically everyone, I think, apart from ITV. And but I was very much bitten by the bug at that point, because what I'd worked out with football was that I did really, really like it. And I got to cover amazing stuff at Talksport. But when it came to commentating on it, you have to do the research in that much more depth. And when I then had to do that, I realised, actually, I'm not as into this as I thought I was. It was a bit of a chore. You know, I just think, got to sit down and do a few hours on Stoke versus Sunderland or whatever it was. And it just didn't light my fire. I really enjoyed doing the matches, but it just didn't. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't do this for forever. But with boxing, as soon as I got involved in that, you know, it was completely the opposite. Yeah, I mean, you know yourself, it's just the most intoxicating sport to cover for every imaginable reason.
Well, you do your own research, don't you? People out there might not know this, but the majority of commentators, at least when I got into the business, got someone else to do their research for them and then provide a set of notes or a binder or whatever, and they'd read from that at appropriate times. But I've noticed in the last few years, whenever I've seen you at shows, you go around with your notebook, you're talking to fighters, getting quotes and things like that. So you just completely take that role on yourself, right?
Yeah, I've always done that. And I do it for Sky now too. So probably in 2000, so I was kind of in and out doing stuff for Sky. Did like Box Nation, Channel 5, all sorts of other things, anything I could get my hands on. And I wasn't bothered about the money, because I knew that it wasn't going to be a lot. That wasn't what it was about at that point. But yeah, so I got brought back into Sky kind of regularly in summer 2016, and then early-ish 2017, Ed Robinson said to me, do you want to, we need someone. Now, Bob Mead retired. He said, we need somebody to do the notes and the research and the stats and all of that. I know that you do all your own anyway. What do you think? And so I said, I had to think about it, because it's not something that I'd ever really entertained the idea of, if you like, doing other people's work for them. And But I thought, yeah, no, I'll go for that. And then packaged it up nicely, saying, but I know this isn't really what you want to do. So, the deal will be that we'll get you to every show and you'll do commentary on the undercard. And he did it well. And so, yeah, I do it for the whole team. Yeah, I mean, Adam does his own too, and he'll look at mine. And the rest of the team will use it as much or as little as they feel they need to. But yeah, I mean, you have to. That's one of the things I enjoy most about it, is because the access is massive. You can get to anyone. You can have a conversation with absolutely anybody. And I don't know what everybody does individually, but if you don't do your own as a commentator, I mean, that is just, to me, that's unthinkable. What is that?
There'll be other commentators watching this, their head in their hands at this point.
Yeah, maybe, but and everybody can do it their own way, I guess. But for me, the idea of like early on at Sky, I would get Bob's notes, but I would already have done my own, and then I'd read his. And of course, there'd be things from his that I would take, because he'd been doing it a lot longer than me and knew a lot more than I did. But yeah, that would be the way that you would use it. You do your own first, and then you would see, let's, different viewpoint here. Somebody else might have something different. And when I send them around to everybody at Sky, like Andy Scott, generally quite often will come back and say, I actually saw these two spar, 7 years ago, like on a Tuesday morning. He's got a great memory. Things like that. Ed will chip in with little bits and pieces, but I don't really understand how. It's not because I wouldn't trust somebody else's work, but the idea of just kind of picking up a sheet of paper and just reading through it and then kind of repeating bits of it parrot fashion, I mean, that's just not, for me at least, that is not how you do this.
I did it for a couple of years for Box Nation, ITV and SecondsOut. I think that's enough different channels to anonymise the people involved. And I don't think I ever had anyone come back to me with their own tidbits or anything like that, which is a damning indictment, I guess, on the people that I worked with. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing it. I really enjoyed, like you, researching, getting to speak to boxers you otherwise probably wouldn't speak to as well, especially the foreign guys that came over. I used to really enjoy that. So
yeah, me too. It's great. It's great talking to the visitors, because you're not really. I mean, one thing I kind of worked out about it was that you've got to try and you have to try and even it up as much as you can, because a lot of these fights I'll be commentating on myself anyway, and obviously the ones you've got a number for, you could probably go see them in the gym. An overseas fighter is coming in on the week of the fight, you can't do that. Obviously you might be able to get them on the phone, but you're going to see them fight week. So generally speaking, during fight week I'll spend more time with them or chatting to them and hanging around them than I will somebody who I know better, because that way you make it more even in your own head. Because if you don't do that, what I find is that subconsciously, almost, you know more about one person than you do about the other. And that might lead you to talk about one more than the other, not to want them to win or anything like that. But if you don't, you've got to try and invest in both camps as equally as you can. And it is just really good fun, when you talk to them during the week, because those little crews that come over from overseas are quite tight, aren't they? And they're quite funny a lot of the time. All boxing people are quite funny, I find, because you've got your own little rituals and habits and dynamics within the group. Fight week's great. Fight week's just my favourite thing, and that's what I'm missing more than anything at the minute, because even when we've got shows, we don't really have. Well, we don't have
normal fight week, yeah. And are you now? You're not exclusive to Sky now, are you? So how does that all work? Because you obviously are doing other bits as well. Are you a freelancer? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I'm a freelancer. I do basically all my TV for Sky, and I can go and do some other things, and I do every now and again. I'll check it with them, and that's just how I choose to do it, really, because they've committed to me. They showed a lot of loyalty to me. I've done the same thing for them. But I've started doing Talk Sport this summer. They got in touch, and that's been great, because that was where I started. And radio and TV are different, so Sky don't care. I mean, it's no skin off their nose. But the good thing about it too is that we do Frank Warren cards at the moment, and that just gives me a closer look, or makes me have a closer look than I would do normally, at what's going on at Queensberry, and that it all just feeds into each other. I think that's a kind of good, healthy thing. So I've been enjoying that.
Are you ever treated with suspicion now you're doing the Warren cards because of your association with Sky? Is it ever like that, spying the camp and all that?
No, not really, not really. I mean, me and Matt Macklin, we do our podcast. We recorded Frank Warren, one with Frank Warren last week, and it comes out tomorrow. And I loved that. It was great. Like a few weeks ago, we had Eddie Hearn on, and getting Frank on was brilliant. And we were asking him about DAZN and what does he think about that, and will they keep going? All sorts of other things as well. But it's really, really interesting to get opposing views, and that's why we did it in a way, me and Matt, because we just thought the great thing about doing this is that we'll be able to, it's our own thing. There's no sponsor, there's no requirements on us whatsoever. We just do whatever we want, and that means you can get on whoever you like and talk about whatever you like, and that I think is a good thing, because you always want to be as balanced as you can, but I think generally there's not really too much I don't think there's really much suspicion of it's just a shame that we've got to the point which America got to quite a long time ago, I guess, where an individual network partners up with an individual promoter. Ideally, it wouldn't be like that, but that's just how it's. I think inevitably it was always going to turn out that way.
One thing I've always wanted to ask you, probably off record, but hey, we're here now. When you've commentated on an event for the undercard, 3-4 fights, and then the new commentary team comes in for the main event, which often happens, how do you feel about that? Is it just, that's my job, no problem? Or do you feel a bit kind of regretful that you're not going to be covering the main event as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't think anyone would expect me to say different. I don't think Adam's a busy man. I doubt he'll have time to watch this, but he would 100% expect me to say exactly what I'm saying, which is that, of course, it hurts because you want to cover the main event, and I've covered numerous main events over the last 3 or 4 years, but never the really big fights, pay-per-views, the like, and that is what I want to do. And I've never made any secret of that, never made any secret of it, because that would be ridiculous. And anybody with any sense at all will know that that's what you're looking at, and that's what you want to do, and that's what you should want to do. And anyone who would kind of sit here and say, "Oh no, it's fine, I love it, it's great, I do the first 3 fights, and then the arena fills up and the PA cranks up and it really hits fever pitch, and then I step aside and let someone else do it. I prefer that. That's better." I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say that.
I mean, if you were to use a football analogy, if you were the star striker getting subbed off after 60 minutes every week, you'd be going and knocking on the boss's door saying, "What do I need to do to get into your plans?" Is that a conversation you've had? Do you go and say to, well, I guess it'd be Adam, "What do I need to do to cover more main events? Is there something I need to work on?" What do you do about that?
It's not really that kind of a situation, in that Adam is the boss, one of the bosses. So that role will only become available if or when he decides to move on, and that's the reality of it. And I'm aware of that, and that is, in some ways it's good, because it means that you don't really end up obsessing about it too much. In other ways it's bad, because that might never happen. But you just, for me personally, you just think about, where are you best off being? And like you said before, boxing is a small world, and where else could I go where I would have as good a gig as the one I've got now? There isn't anywhere, because BT Sport's tied up. That's John Rawlings' job. So patience is definitely a virtue in this job, because if you're lucky, it can be a long career. Martin Tyler turned 75 the other day, he's still, he's still the main man, isn't he? And I had no idea how old he was. I'd seen him around at football a lot, but I remember seeing games from like the early 80s and I recognised the voice and I just think, God, how old is Martin Tyler? How long has he been doing this? And the answer is a really, really long time. So you can't allow yourself to get too frustrated. You just need to keep doing your job as well as you can possibly do it, because there's no way that you don't. This is true of most things, which is that the more you do it, the better you get at it. But for something like commentary, that is really, really true, because you see more scenarios, and as you get older, your voice kind of settles down a bit. And just everything, the more you do it, the more miles you get in your legs, if you like, the better you get at it. So, I mean, I do kind of knock on Adam's door, on Ed Robinson's door. I do that. I'm quite proactive in that regard. You've got to fight your own corner. You've got to get your shoulder to the wheel and push your own case as much as possible. And I've never had a problem doing that. Basically, because I've been freelance. I've been self-employed forever, really. I mean, I'm on the books at Sky now, and I was on the books at TalkSport, but there was never any contract, so they could always just like shuffle you out the door whenever they felt like it. And in the early days at TalkSport, that seemed to happen to people every other day. It was a very interesting place. And so you just get used to having what other people might think are quite uncomfortable conversations, but I never find there to be anything uncomfortable about it, because you're just honest. You're not complaining. You're just saying, look, I want to do more of this. And they might say, great, you can do that. Or they might say, not really the right time. And you think, all right, well, I'll be back. And you know I'll be back. It's
slightly more mild-mannered Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, possibly.
What have been there's myriad highlights, obviously, but if you had to pick out, I don't know, a top three in no particular order in your time in boxing, what have been the top three highlights?
I think it would depend really if I was just picking the occasion or whether it was something I sort of worked on myself. I was talking to Macklin about this the other day, as to kind of fights we commentated on that we really, really enjoyed. And the one that came up for both of us straight away was not necessarily the best fight, but was Sam Eggington against Frankie Gavin. Like, we both loved that. It was a really, really good night. The crowd were bang up for it. And we hadn't done that much work together at that point. It was just a raucous kind of occasion and fight. Errol Spence against Sean Porter might be the best fight that I've covered, I think, because it was just really high level stuff. In terms of occasions, the stadium fights with Joshua were absolutely incredible. The first one at Wembley, obviously the main event, was amazing. And I wasn't commentating on it, but to be that close to it, because I was ringside, was absolutely sensational. But one thing that always really stands out for me is Lucien Boutte against Carl Froch, because that was towards the end of the first season that I was working at Sky, and I was doing the undercard. Ian Darke was doing the top of the bill. It was late because of American TV, and it was just an amazing couple of days. The atmosphere was brilliant. The weather was fantastic. And by the time he made his ring walk, 10,000 people or thereabouts in the Nottingham Arena, and he comes into No Easy Way Out, and it was just, the atmosphere was unbelievable. Like, it's the only other thing that I've experienced like that, really, in a kind of intimate venue, was I went to Ricky Hatton's comeback fight, and I'd not been to any of his other big fights, and that the ring walk for that was, I was doing the world feed for that. The ring walk for that was mad, but yeah, Froch beating Lucien Boutte was. I'm not sure that'll get beaten, because it was quite early on for me, I guess. And it was just, anyone who was there will tell you. I don't know if you were there, but anyone who was there will tell you it was just absolutely off the charts.
Great stuff. And excluding people that you have worked with, who would be your dream commentary partner?
Excluding people I've worked with, that's a good question.
Thanks.
That is a good question because I work with quite a lot of people. I'd really fancy it. The reason I say this is, but I did some work with Nate Campbell on some Olympic qualifiers 4 years ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I'd definitely like to team up with him again. He's a really interesting bloke and really, really good fun. But I quite fancy a crack at it with Roy Jones.
Yeah, okay.
They're friends, those two. They're friends. And Nate Campbell kind of describes Roy Jones as being a slightly more high octane version of him,
Jesus.
which is sort of unimaginable to me, really. But I would love a crack at it with Roy Jones because I just thought he was amazing. But people talk about the best fighters of the last few decades, and he kind of tends to get overlooked a bit, I find. And I just cannot ever work out why, because, okay, he's gone on longer than people would have liked him to, and he's lost a few that he wouldn't have. But so what? I don't, that's his choice. It doesn't diminish him in any way for me. And yeah, Superman. Co-commentary with him, that'd be good.
Well, the word's out there now. Hopefully he's a fan of Seconds Out and gets in touch. Before we let you go, just let people out there know how and where they can get Mackenzies Take, when it comes out as well.
So Mackenzies Take comes out sort of late Monday night, sort of overnight Monday into Tuesday. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's pretty much anywhere really. And if you just search Mackenzies Take, you'll find it. We've got some good ones. We've got Frank Warren tomorrow, recording one with Luke Campbell on Thursday night. We're recording hopefully a really good one tomorrow evening, but I'm not totally sure that it's going to happen, so I won't jinx it. It's just really good fun. We really enjoy doing it, and particularly during lockdown, it kept me sane really, because there wasn't that much to do. And usually we'd record it in person, so and that is better. We'll definitely get back to that when we can. But the great thing about Zoom is that we've been able to nip over and get a few people on who we just don't really ever see, so we'd never really be able to do it in person. So like Nate was an example. We had him on, and others, and you can get two people on at once and stuff like that. It's good fun. It's good fun. So yeah, by all means, get stuck into that if you can.
And we know, and I'm sure you'll admit this, you're not the biggest entrepreneur in your own family. Your wife, of course, has been making waves in the chocolate world. Just tell us a little bit about that and how people can sample some of this delicious chocolate.
Yeah, will do. Thanks. So yeah, my wife Amarachi, she founded Coco Chocolate, which is Lucocoa, 5 years ago, nearly 6 years ago, and it started in our one-bedroom flat. So what she does is she imports cocoa beans from various places, and she makes it from scratch. So sometimes people will describe her as a chocolatier. She's not a chocolatier, she's a chocolate maker. Chocolatiers get other people's already made chocolate and do their own thing with it, whereas chocolate makers make it from the beginning. And it's going really well. We moved it out of the house. So we moved house, and then we had like a little outhouse down the bottom of the garden where she was doing it. And then the start of the year, we moved it out of the house to an archway in Bermondsey, a place called Spa Terminus. And we got set up and ready to go pretty much as soon as lockdown hit, which at the time was a bit worrying, but it's gone really well. It's meant that she's had to concentrate on online orders, so which was something she'd never really done before. And if you go to the website, lucocochocolate.com, it's not cheap, I won't lie. But if you really like high quality dark chocolate, particularly, then it'll be your bag. Basically, what she's trying to do is get people to think about chocolate in the way they think about coffee and wine, in that if you buy expensive beans, it's going to taste better. If different regions, different flavors, different grades, basically. So the reason it's more expensive is because it's that optimum grade. And yeah, she's done amazingly with it. It's I can't quite believe it sometimes. I helped out during lockdown, just wrapping bars for 3 months, which was useful for her, but by the end was pretty, yeah.
Glad to be back in the saddle.
Yeah. It's just really repetitive and quite. But I was lucky because it got me out of the house at a time when other people couldn't get out of the house, so I shouldn't really complain about it. But she's quite she's a harsh taskmaster. You know, she pushes you hard. She does push you hard. She's got this thing where she's the most. We'd all say this about our partners, but she's the most kind, generous person I know. Much more naturally, much more so than I am. I'm not like some kind of monster, but it just comes naturally to her. Whereas for me, it's more of an effort, really. Like you know how there are things sometimes where you just think, to be a good bloke, I've got to do this.
Yeah.
But you don't really want to, but you do it anyway. So you know that's a tick. She doesn't really operate like that. She'll just kind of do it, and it doesn't really occur to her that she wouldn't do it. But with the business, like it's different. She's hardcore, and I was ready to stop wrapping bars about a month before I did, and I was constantly making hints and sending up distress signals like a fighter in his corner. He doesn't want to quit. He wants his corner to pull him out, and she just ignored me continually, just like pushed me back out for another round.
Certain corners, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just get back out there, you know. Yeah, exactly.
Great stuff. Not great stuff that you were worked like a dog, but great stuff that the business is doing so well. Really appreciate your time. It's been absolutely fascinating, hopefully for people watching as it has been for me. And I look forward to doing it again, hopefully in a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been good fun doing these kinds of things over the last few weeks. It passes the time, doesn't it? And I've watched a lot more kind of content over the last few months than I normally would, because people have just kind of branched away from what they normally do, haven't they? In some cases anyway, and just thought, you know, we need to, because there was no news basically.
Exactly, yeah. We're interviewing people that normally we wouldn't, not normally we wouldn't, but normally maybe we wouldn't have time to within the schedule.
Yeah, you wouldn't have time to, exactly. So thanks for having me on. It's been good fun.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for being on. And I'm sure I'll see you soon, hopefully, if there's no second lockdown. Yeah. All right. Cheers, Andy. Take care, mate.